So hello there, and welcome back to another Night of the Movies podcast and Spotlight Night. And in these podcasts, I like talking all things movies and TV and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, that's right, I'm reviewing the new Wallace and Gromit film, Wallace and Gromit: Vengeance Most Fowl. So, without further ado, let's get into it, shall we? Wallace and Gromit: Vengeance Most Fowl. So, this, as I've already said, is the new Wallace and Gromit film. And I think it airs on Christmas Day on BBC One, and then it comes out on Netflix in January of next year. Christ, we're almost in 2025. That feels very weird to say. But anyway, going back on to what I was saying. Yes, this is a new Wallace and Gromit film, and it's co-directed by Nick Park, who previously directed all the previous Wallace and Gromit films and Merlin Crossingham. And I was very excited about watching this new Wallace and Gromit film because this new Wallace and Gromit film. That's what I meant to say. This new Wallace and Gromit film because I am a big Wallace and Gromit fan. I've spoken about it at length on this channel in the past. I absolutely love the Wallace and Gromit films. And I love Aardman animations. I love the stop motion animation of Aardman Studios because it looks tactile. It looks like the sort of animation you can touch, and it's my favourite style of animation. You know, there's a lot of style of film animation which I really admire, but Aardman is my favourite. You know, whether it's Chicken Run, Creature Comforts, Early Man, which I think is very underrated, Pirate on an Adventure with Scientists, the Shaun the Sheep stuff which they've done, not only the TV show but the movies, which I think are both fantastic, alongside all the other stuff they've done. Every single time Aardman makes a film, I think they hit all the right spots, even with their non-stop motion animation films, because they made Arthur Christmas and Flushed Away as well, which aren't stop motion animated, but are still really good films in my opinion. Yeah, I absolutely love Aardman Animation Studios. Whenever they make a new film, I immediately get very excited. And I get even more excited when I hear it's going to be a new Wallace and Gromit film. Because the last Wallace and Gromit film we got was all the way back in 2008 with Wallace and Gromit: A Matter of Loaf and Death. You know, 14 years ago now. And I have been wanting to see another Wallace and Gromit film for the longest time. And finally it's here. Finally 2024 brings something to look forward to. Brings something worthwhile. That's what I was hoping was going to be the case. So you get the point I'm making. I was very excited about watching the new Wallace and Gromit film. However, I was a little deflated to see that was releasing on Netflix, because that made me think that, oh, it's probably not going to get a theatrical release. And one of my dreams is to watch a Wallace and Gromit film in the cinema, and I haven't had the chance to watch a new Wallace and Gromit film in the cinema would just be the cherry on the icing on top of the cake, you know what I mean? So I was a little deflated about that, but then a couple of weeks ago now, I found that a cinema that was about an hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes away from me was showing this new Wallace and Gromit: Vengeance Most Fowl at the cinema, and I got very excited when I saw that was the case, and I booked my tickets straight away. So I was lucky enough to see this at the cinema. That time of viewing this early, I got to see a preview screening of the film, essentially, and I was so excited to see a new Wallace and Gromit film in the cinema. Now, unfortunately, my cinema experience was not great. In fact, it was pretty damn rubbish, if I'm going to be honest, but I still had a wonderful time at the cinema nonetheless. Because I'm not even going to give a plot synopsis for this film. I'm just going to go straight into my thoughts on this new Wallace and Gromit film. I absolutely loved it. It was such a delight to watch, just getting back into the world of Wallace and Gromit, seeing these characters again, and everything in this film just makes you smile. You can't help but watch this film and smile and laugh along with it, and just feel this warmth towards it. That's something Aardman films have always done so well, in my opinion. There's this warmth to their films. And I think that's particularly the case with all the Wallace and Gromit films, and this Wallace and Gromit film is no different. I just sat there throughout its 1 hour and 10-minute runtime with a huge grin on my face. And I will say it doesn't quite reach the height of, say, The Wrong Trousers, which this film is kind of a sequel to, by the way. You know, you have the return of Feathers McGraw, who was the villain in The Wrong Trousers. But, you know, this film doesn't quite reach the heights of The Wrong Trousers, or it doesn't quite reach the height of A Close Shave, or The Curse of the Were-Rabbit either. And this film is also kind of a sequel to The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, you know. Have the police officer who's voiced by Peter Kay returning in this film in quite a big role, a much bigger role than I thought he was going to be. So you got, you know, Peter Kay returning as a police officer, and you got some of the townspeople as well. Some of the townspeople from The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, they also are featured again in this film. So this is kind of a sequel to The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, and also kind of a sequel to The Wrong Trousers as well. But it doesn't quite reach the heights of those films, and it doesn't quite reach the heights of A Close Shave either. But I would say I enjoyed it more than A Matter of Loaf and Death, and I love that film. Not a knock on A Matter of Loaf and Death at all. I think that's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful film, and I think it's better than A Grand Day Out as well, which I also love. I think this is such a good film because it's so clever, and not in a way which the other Wallace and Gromit films are. I mean, don't get me wrong, all the Wallace and Gromit films are insanely clever, but this film was clever in its storytelling, which I really didn't expect. I'm not going to go into details, but this doesn't have a straightforward story. There's a twist at one point, which I didn't see coming, and maybe that's because I'm a bit stupid, but also I didn't see it coming, and I was very surprised by that. It doesn't have your typical Wallace and Gromit story, and I really liked the storytelling in this film. Plus, the film's full of all these film references, which Wallace and Gromit has always been. I can't even speak apparently today. Which Wallace and Gromit has done in all of their movies. You know, Curse of the Were-Rabbit has a lot of references to King Kong, and at the start of that film, there's a big reference to Thunderbird, where you see, you know, Wallace and Gromit getting ready. And then, you know, you get Close Shave, that's got references to Terminator at one point. There's loads of film references in the previous Wallace and Gromit films, and this Wallace and Gromit film is no different. This is full of cinematic references. I'm not going to go into great detail, but there's a big reference to Italian Job in there, which, if you have seen Italian Job and you watch this film around the Christmas period, I'd be very surprised if you don't see the reference. It's blatant, but it works so well. There's a brilliant reference to The Great Escape. There is a little bit of Jurassic Park in there, I felt. There's a little bit of Mission Impossible in there. There's also a little bit of... What's the other film that I was thinking of? I should have put this down in my notes. Oh, the other film that it had references to. There's a little bit of James Bond in there. I mean, that wasn't the film I was trying... That wasn't the film I was getting to. But there's quite a few films referenced in this Wallace and Gromit film in the way you want there to be. And not only are there quite a few cinematic references to non-Aardman films, there are also quite a few cinematic references to other Aardman films and other Aardman projects. There's actually one little crossover. I'm not going to spoil what, and I probably should have said that because it's a little bit of a spoiler anyway. But it's a lot of crossover to another Aardman project in this film, which I was very surprised by, and delightfully so. But yeah, there's also references to the previous Wallace and Gromit films. You know, before I saw this movie, I read some of the reviews online, because it premiered about a month ago or so now, this new Wallace and Gromit film. And some people are calling it, you know, it's a sort of Wallace and Gromit best of. It's a best of Wallace and Gromit. And I can completely see where they're coming from. There are a lot of references to other Wallace and Gromit films in this new Wallace and Gromit film. I've already said you see some of the townspeople from Curse of the Were-Rabbit return here. You know, Peter Kay's character, the police officer, he returns here. You also see the motorbike. You know, it's not called a motorbike, but you know what I mean. The motorbike that Wallace and Gromit ride at the start of Close Shave. You see that return in this film. That's not a spoiler, that was revealed in one of the trailers. You also hear some of the music from Master of Loaf and Death at one point. And there's all these different references to the previous Wallace and Gromit films, including probably the biggest reference, which is of course the return of Feathers McGraw, which works brilliantly. They do not overuse Feathers McGraw in this film. I was actually surprised by how, I'm not going to say underused he was, because I don't think he was underused at all, but I was actually surprised by how he was used. I was about to say how little he was used. He's not used, he's used quite a substantial amount, but he's also not overused. I love how they did that. It didn't feel like they just forced him back into the narrative because of the popularity surrounding that character. I mean, I absolutely love Feathers McGraw. Feathers McGraw, and this is not me trying to be funny or exaggerating, he's one of my favourite villains in cinema history. I love that character. He doesn't speak at all. I'm assuming it's a he, by the way. They don't speak at all, but you feel so threatened by him, and I absolutely loved that character, and that's one of the reasons I was so deliriously excited about watching this new Wallace and Gromit film. And I was slightly worried that they're going to misuse him in this film. They don't. They use Feathers McGraw perfectly, and he fits into the narrative perfectly. You know, there's a section of the film which he's not really in, but it makes complete sense why he's not there, and how they use that character. Oh my god. Every time he was on screen, I had the biggest grin on my face. Just seeing Feathers McGraw back, I thought it was genius. And there's this is not a spoiler, but I'm going to reveal a little detail here. It's just a little joke, a little running joke that happens in the movie. There's a joke that whenever he puts the hat on, everyone's like, oh, it's not Feathers McGraw, he doesn't look like that. And then when he takes the hat off, it's like, oh my god, it's Feathers McGraw. I might have got it the wrong way around there, but it's something like that. And I think that joke was just absolutely genius. And it's a recurring joke in the film that I thought was so funny. And this film is so funny. It's one of the funniest films of the year. To be honest, looking back over the films of the year, unless I'm misremembering, this is probably the most I've laughed at a film in the cinema intentionally over the past year. I loved the comedy in this movie. It's so funny, and it's not going to work for everybody because there's a lot of British humour. That's always what Wallace and Gromit has been. It's a very British thing, and so I can completely understand why maybe some non-British audiences wouldn't gel with this film, and why this film wouldn't be for everybody. I completely understand why, but I love the humour in this film, and I love the Britishness of the Wallace and Gromit films because I'm from the UK, so I love all that. And as somebody who's grown up watching the Wallace and Gromit films, who's had them in their lives for as long as I can remember, I was sat there and just completely delighted by this movie. And you can tell how much it worked me because of how positive I am about this film. I love the gnome as well. I was a bit unsure about the gnome going into this film. I don't know why, I was a bit unsure about it, but I thought the gnome, or should I say the gnomes, a little hint there about something that happens in this film. But yeah, there's a gnome in particular called Norbot, and I thought that gnome was great. Not as good as Hutch. I still think Hutch is a slightly better yeah, I think Hutch is a slightly better supporting character if we're going to compare both, but I think Norbot is a close second. Norbot was, yeah, I loved that gnome. I will say, this is probably my only criticism, and it's not really a big criticism at that, but there's a reoccurring joke with this song that the gnome sings. And it's funny at first, and the joke did not make me laugh as it went on, but it felt a little overused, that joke with the song that the gnome sings. Not a big criticism, but it did I did think that joke ran its course, and that they kept going back to it. That would probably be my only criticism. I mean, there's a couple of small missed opportunities here and there, like you go back to the museum in this film that you saw, you know, in The Long Trousers, and one of the genius things about The Long Trousers is when you see the museum in that film, you see all the other things in the museum, and you see that there's a penguin cavemen, you know, that look like Feathers McGraw, and I love those little additions in the Aardman films, and you do get those little additions in this film, for sure. But you just don't get to see the museum again, and I thought it was a slightly missed opportunity that we didn't get to see the museum again. not a big criticism. That's really a nitpick, you know. And I thought that the Gnome song was slightly overused. Again, not a big criticism. Didn't really get on my nerves. I'm trying to find criticisms with this film. That was the thing. I was sat there trying to find criticisms, and I only got those two little nitpicks. They're not even big things. They're just things which, you know, if you asked me if something could have been done better, I would have said those two things. But even those two things didn't really bother me in the long run, because I found this film heartwarming, funny, surprisingly clever in its storytelling, which I didn't expect to say. Very clever as a whole. There's tons of things in here which just exemplify the genius of Aardman. I love seeing these characters back. I love seeing Wallace back. And by the way, you cannot tell that Wallace is voiced by a different actor. You know, Peter Sallis, who voiced Wallace previously in all the previous Wallace and Gromit movies, he has sadly passed away now. He passed away in 2017. He does not return to voice Wallace in this movie. They have a different actor, but you cannot tell. You cannot tell at all. In fact, if you didn't know, you'd probably still think it's Peter Sallis voicing Wallace from Beyond the Grave. You know, it's that good and it's that seamless. And I loved seeing Wallace back. I loved how they continued his character. I loved how Gromit in this story, in this Wallace and Gromit story, in Vengeance Most Fowl, is getting bored at the start of the movie of Wallace and all his inventions. He thinks Wallace has gone he's inventing too much. I loved how that was done, and I loved how that kind of came back later on in the film. There's a whole thing with... Actually, I'm not going to spoil that. No, that's a bit of a spoiler. Yeah, I was about to say something, but I'm not going to. You know, I think people will really like this little thing that I was about to reference in the film, but I found the end of the film very heartwarming. That's all I'm going to say. I even got a little emotional at the end of the film. Probably the most emotional I've got in any Wallace and Gromit film. Actually, no, I'll take that back. Curse of the Were-Rabbit, I think, is the most emotional I've got watching a Wallace and Gromit film. But this is a close second again. Yeah, and I love seeing Gromit back. I loved seeing Feathers McGraw back. He was used perfectly. I loved seeing some of the side characters back that we've seen in previous Wallace and Gromit films, like the police officer voiced by Peter Kay. Fits perfectly into this movie, and yeah, there's a lot of funny comedy with him, and there was something about this film where it's like, yes, it felt familiar. Yes, it was referencing all these previous Wallace and Gromit films that have been before. Yes, you can argue it's a best of Wallace and Gromit, for sure. But it also felt original and new and creative. It somehow struck this balance of being very familiar, of feeling very familiar, but also very new at the same time. And I loved that about this film. Yeah. It's... it's just... oh... it's absolutely brilliant. And I'm so delighted to say that. Because I will admit I was a little worried. And I will also say, I don't think I've said this yet, I had a terrible cinema experience. Like a really terrible, terrible cinema experience. Okay, it probably wasn't that bad. But still, I did not have a good cinema experience. You know, I went to go and watch this. And this is the last thing I'll say, by the way. I know I'm being rambling on. But I went to go and watch this film at a cinema I'd never been to before, so already I get a bit weird about that just because of the way I am. Whenever I have to go to a new cinema, I don't know, get weird about that because I'm so used to going to certain cinemas, and this was a completely new cinema for me, and it was in a very weird location as well anyway. But yeah, I went to this new cinema, and the cinema itself, the screening room itself, was small. I couldn't hear the film as much as I hoped I would. You know, one of the reasons I love going to the cinema so much is because you get the full experience of a film. You get to hear all the sound effects in one enclosed room, and it can really make you feel like you're there with the characters. I didn't get that with this Wallace and Gromit film, not because of anything in the film itself, but because of the screening room. The sound in the screening room was remarkably quiet. I could still hear what was going on. I could still hear all the dialogue and everything like that, and the music is wonderful for the film. That's something I haven't mentioned yet. Yeah, the music, brilliant. But yeah, I couldn't hear all the details in the film though, because of the sound in the cinema. It was quiet. And then, at the same time, I was in this cinema that was about 3/4 of the way full, And I was at the back of the cinema next to this kid who couldn't stop moving about on this chair. And whenever you moved about on the chair, it made noises. You know, I was on this really weird sliding chair that I sort of had to stop myself from sliding off. It was that bad. And so, yes, I was completely focused on the film. Don't get me wrong, but I was also focused on trying not to slip off this chair. And at the same time, the guy who was looking after the kid, probably his dad, I don't know that for certain, obviously, but the guy who was looking after this kid, he wasn't doing a good job of doing so. He was on his phone through some parts of the film. I'm like, really? You've paid, what, a tenner to come and watch a new Wallace and Gromit film, and you're on your phone answering messages? That's what I did feel like at one point in the movie. And it felt as well like he'd taken this kid out, probably his kid, to babysit him, you know, as a form of babysitting. And I don't mind that, you know, I mean, okay, I'll amend what I mean there. I don't mind when somebody babysits their kid with a in front of the TV at home. That's completely fine, but don't take them to the cinema, particularly an almost full cinema, where other people are trying to enjoy the film and the kid's just messing about. So I did not have the best viewing experience. And I actually think that when I watched on my TV over the Christmas period, which I'll definitely be doing at least 2 more times over the Christmas period, plenty more times post the Christmas period as well, but I actually think when I rewatch this film on TV within the next couple of weeks, it's going to be louder than when I watch it in the cinema, which is not what I wanted to say. You know, I did not have the best cinema experience, is the point I'm making. It was actually quite a disappointing cinema experience, but this tells you how good the film was. Sometimes when I have a really bad cinema experience, it can affect my liking of the film. That's not the case with this new Wallace and Gromit. I had a bad cinema experience, but I still think the film is fantastic. It's a cracking film. You know, it's a cracking film in all the ways you want it to be. Yeah. I absolutely loved it. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that Wallace and Gromit Vengeance Most Fowl, I'm going to say it's a... Am I going to do it? I'm going to do it. I'm going to say it's a... You know what? Yeah. I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10. I think it's that good. There is not really anything I would change about this movie. I mean, I'd probably give all Wallace and Gromit films a 10 out of 10. Yeah, that's the thing, though. And yeah, sure, I don't think it quite reached the heights of The Long Trousers, or Curse of the Were-Rabbit, or A Close Shave. But the fact that the last Wallace and Gromit film was, what, 14 years ago now? 14 years ago on Christmas Day it would be. The fact that it was that long ago and they've still managed to recapture the magic, because it is magic how they make these films work. I still don't quite get it. The amount of time, energy and effort that must go into making any of these Aardman films. I heard an interview with Nick Park, who co-directed the film, who said that it took about 5 years to make this film, and that just blows my mind. You know, I'm a very impatient person, so I couldn't do any stop motion animation. I've tried to in the past with Lego, but I think I failed miserably with that. And yeah, the point I'm making is stop motion animation blows my mind in general. And just the animation itself blows my mind, and I forgot the point I was making. But I'm just so stunned by the amount of the filmmaking that goes into this movie. The filmmaking that goes into any Aardman film. And that's what I was saying. How they managed to recapture the magic and recapture that classic Wallace and Gromit feel with this new Wallace and Gromit film is not an easy thing to do, because so many people have this emotional and nostalgic attachment to Wallace and Gromit. And I really think they managed to recapture all that. Recapture those feels we had of watching Wallace and Gromit when we were a much younger age. It definitely recaptured those feels for me, you know. And that's another reason I absolutely loved it. And the musical score by Julian Knott, who composed all the music for the previous Wallace and Gromit films, and Lorne Baffel, who came in to write some of the new music for this film as well, is... oh, it's a joy. There's a lot of classic themes from the Wallace and Gromit films used in this movie as well. A lot of some of the themes you've heard in the likes of A Close Shave, Long Trousers, and A Massive Loaf and Death, and of course, the main Wallace and Gromit theme is used in this film in a very, in a way that would just make you smile straight off the bat. You know, the opening credits to this film are very similar to the opening credits to Curse of the Were-Rabbit. Not really a spoiler, but you know, in the opening credits to Curse of the Were-Rabbit, you get the camera tracking around all these pictures of Wallace and Gromit in their house as you see them growing up throughout the years. It's very similar, the opening to this film, as to Curse of the Were-Rabbit, which is another big similarity between Curse of the Were-Rabbit and this film, and Vengeance Most Fowl, and that's another reason I loved it. So yeah, there's just so much I loved about this film. Whether I can't speak apparently. Whether it was the animation, the music, the story, the storytelling, seeing the characters back, seeing the new characters, because there are new characters in the film that I think are great, and just being back in the world of Wallace and Gromit, being back with these characters, and feeling that same sort of feel you had when you watched all the previous Wallace and Gromit films. You know, there is a magic that comes with this movie, and I've missed that magical feel for so long. I missed that feel since 2008 with A Matter of Loaf and Death, but I got it back again here. Yeah, Vengeance Most Fowl is a very welcome return to the world of Wallace and Gromit in all the ways you want it to be, and I think is the perfect Christmas present from Aardman this Christmas. And so, all in all, as what he said, and as I'm going to say once more in this podcast today, Wallace and Gromit Vengeance Most Fowl is a 10 out of 10 from me. Anyway guys, that's it for today's podcast. If you have seen Wallace and Gromit Vengeance Most Fowl, please let me know your thoughts on it in the comment section below. And as always, thanks for watching or listening to this podcast. And if you haven't yet, please do click down below and like and subscribe on this podcast, on this video. And look forward to many more videos and many more podcasts. Just hit my computer there. I look forward to many more videos and many more podcasts coming very, very soon on this channel. As already said, thank you so much for watching or listening to this podcast. And I will see you guys again soon. But bye for now. Bye.